Why are emotions so important to manage? They are a source of energy. So every time you go into your emotions, you have to bring yourself back to neutral, right? So anytime you fall real low, you're going to have to take the time to bring yourself back up to, a content, neutral place, right? So that doesn't say we don't want to experience our emotions, but it's important to like acknowledge that there's a lot of grieving you're going to do from your childhood. When you're recognizing that you're in abusive patterns with people and habits and behaviors, like that's going to take a toll on you, feeling really low, like when you're always having to bring back to neutral. Another thing with emotions is like I would get overly excited about things. Like when I was in my stage of spirituality and manifesting, I was encouraged to feel like I was already in it, right? And for me, that meant, feeling like I'm living in that large house and being excited about being where that was, or trying to, like, I didn't know what I was doing, to be honest. I just felt like, well, if I was in that house, I'd be really excited and really happy, right? And I'd like live it to believe it, I guess. And I would just walk around like I was living in that house. And because I was currently living in this house, which was like small and unfinished, right? So for me, I'm like, I would like some more space. Um, and so when I would do that, because I thought that's how you manifest, it was like, you really have to believe it. When you find out it's not happening, it's such a disappointing fall, right? And I just knew that, like, this is where I've gone from, like, I used to, when I was in the spiritual community, like, they try to, like, you always got to be happy and grateful. And it feels like a different way of suppressing your emotions, different from religion, where there's a lack of awareness that, like, this is how you're being suppressed. But in spirituality, it's in a delusion where they're saying, well, you're just happy all the time and just be positive and affirm like this situation. But for me, I recognize emotions being as something where it's a roadmap telling me where I'm actually at in life. So if I'm not feeling happy, if I'm feeling stressed, I found it more important to go in and find out why am I feeling this way, instead of trying to force feed myself a toxic positive emotion. Or and then also, like I said, the other side of things, to being in negative emotion all the time, that's not healthy either, right? Because you can go so far low and too high, where both are inaccurate and unrealistic, and not they're out of touch with reality. When you're so low, you can't see clearly because of, like, maybe you just had somebody come at you and try to take you off your track, right? And so when that happens a number of times and you can't see it for what it is, it can feel really hopeless, and you feel like everybody's like that. And no matter, whenever I put myself out, someone's always going to come at me and target me. And the reality of the situation is there's always going to be haters out there. And when you recognize what a hater is, and it can be scary, because maybe you've had past situations where haters are, have control over the environment. But for me, I recognized that those were not my environments. And I also recognized what would be a safer place for me to reveal myself, if that makes sense, as opposed to knowing that it's kind of like when you put a fresh strawberry in a pile of moldy strawberries. Like, why would you do that, right? That doesn't make sense. And that's what sometimes we try to do. We try to think like this is our only area or environment or avenue to grow ourselves and put ourselves out there. But what I learned is, when I learned to recognize people for who they truly are, I learned that they're closed off and they're not open to what I have to say. So why would I put myself as a target in that arena? It doesn't make sense, right? And I had to recognize the difference between me and those people. And I used to put, like, I used to see people like that we were the same, both wounded, but the intentions are very different. And when I started to learn who's not healing and who is remaining comfortable, that really showed me where to place myself and not to put myself, and how to show up and how not to show up. And that's that's a protector mode for when you're in a prey mentality, right? When you feel like you don't have a lot of resources, where you don't feel like you got a lot of backing or networking. I had to find ways to protect myself and stop putting myself out there. I also recognized I was starting to put myself out there often, because I needed that validation. I needed I needed those people who had backstabbed me to see me, but they're never gonna see you. Like, they're never gonna see you, right? So, um, I had to learn. They're not gonna see you the way you need them to. They see you as competition. They don't see you as a soul tribe. That's what I'm trying to say. They see you as like they got to they're triggered by you. You're triggering them because they're too far from you. They're too far. And so when I start to recognize people for who they were and who they weren't, then I can recognize that person is too far from where I am, and so that's not going to be part of my soul tribe. And that doesn't mean I hate them, that I look down on them. I'm just recognizing where they're at in life and where they're not. And so the sooner I was able to recognize people that were like that, then I could recognize and look for, the direction I was moving in for people that were in higher positions. And what I mean by that, they were elevated, they were understanding, they could put themselves in other people's shoes, they've had life experience, they've been rejected a number of times because they were looking for something better, they were trying to become better. And so when you recognize those people, those would be the people I move towards. And now that can be confusing because at one point I used to put all these different people on pedestals because they had more friends, they had more success, they were in a position that I want to be in. Maybe they had their own business, they had a bigger house. They seemed to have the life that I wanted. And the only problem was when I started trying to attain that life myself, I was learning what it takes to do that. And I could see that these people didn't have those characteristics or traits or values in order to attain that lifestyle. So I started to say, hey, they didn't get there the way I'm getting there. I'm from the ground up. I'm doing this by myself. These people got there because they've used others, because they've required other people to carry their emotional baggage, because they really are very selfish and they don't think about other people, and that seems to work for them. But that's not who I am. So that path is not going to be for me. Those aren't my people. That's not my path. And I had to recognize where I was running in the wrong direction, looking for the support from the people who couldn't even support themselves. They were codependent on a number of different groups and communities and people. And so when I recognized who I was and what I was doing, then I could then move in a direction that was better for me and less targeting and less investing. Like, I wasn't investing any longer in like the opinions and the people that were coming from that way. And you gotta understand, haters are very insecure. They're very weak. They're that's why they need so many numbers. That's why they're so fake, because they can't be authentic. They really are triggered by the truth of their situation and their reality. If they really wanted to get real with it, it would be quite. That would be a place for depression, where you're trying to like put the pieces together between your reality and the delusion. So yeah, so I found when I got better with recognizing people who they were and who I wasn't, and vice versa, then that's where you get less emotions. And because you're not investing anymore. Because at one point I'm like, these are my people. Why aren't they accepting me? And that can really be like hard on you, because you've already felt rejected from your family. They weren't willing to accept you as you were. Like, you're trying to grow into that authentic being that is like better, your better version. You're trying to mature and grow, and you're constantly being rejected by these other individuals who you once put on a pedestal. And like, the reality of the situation is there's so many people out there that really fake it to make it, but like they're high in confidence and low in experience. And what happens is when they actually see you doing the work that they pretend to do, the thing is, when you put yourself beside that individual, and if you just had a conversation, if one person had a conversation with the both of you and just looked at it and really could recognize, you'd be able to see the very big difference. And it's sometimes it's not even a conversation. Like, usually I can pick out like a few things that people say and how they are. And I'm like, that person has not done that work. Because the more work you do, the more you're able to call these people out, and you're able to see a fake because you went through that path. And I used to tell myself, well, everybody's different, and I can expect people are going to heal the same way I heal. That's not what I'm talking about. These people, like, it's like You're going to see value in certain things. You're going to recognize, this is like, when I have a situation where someone's not cleaning up after themselves and they require me to do it for them, and I say no, and someone says yes, that person doesn't know how they're losing their energy freely by doing the other person's work, and they're also enabling them. So once you learn that by doing other people's work for them, and even your kids, you're enabling them and they're losing the lesson, and that's going to make them codependent on the people that you're trying to avoid, you realize, okay, I need to step back and I need to let these kids do their own thing. They need to learn through the struggle and the challenge, instead of me placing pedestals for them to step upon in order to be successful. Because successful says I can walk alone and I don't need all these other people around me. And so when you start to learn how to do that yourself, you learn who the people are and who they aren't. And in the beginning, that was very emotional, but the more I recognize that and allow myself to recognize that, and I stop ignoring the signs that these people are who they are, and instead of running towards them to fix them, it becomes like a repellent. It's true. You're just like, it's so gross. You're so grossed out by, like, wow, that's how they really are. That's actually who they really are. That's because you got to think, these people are doing this for so long. This is their survival mechanism, is by either being like really friendly or playing helpless or aloof. Like they're acting like they don't notice that, they're making a mess and shit's blowing across their lawn, and whatever the fact is, they're trying to pretend like, I'm just so helpless and I've got all this other stuff I've got to do and I can't manage all my responsibilities. Well, that's your chosen responsibility. So either unchoose it and release it, or take care of it. It's not my job. And so the more I remove myself from that emotional place of feeling bad for somebody, feeling guilty that I could help them out, but my cup is not full yet. So I'm not in a position to help out. I'm still a target. I'm still a moving target. That's not my responsibility. And while I want to help people to get to where, to get to a better place, you got to recognize where some of these people aren't willing to help themselves. And that's not my job anymore. Like, if you can't even help yourself, and if you're not willing to understand what I'm trying to tell you, and you're trying to make it more complicated than it is, then they're still in like denial and delusion. And while I can recognize the pain in them, that is not my pain to carry. That is not my burden to carry. That is still theirs. I can't do anything. They are feral in nature. Like, if you try to drag that person with you, it's just going to be a fight, and it's going to slow you down, and it's going to be a mess that you're going to have to clean up when you feel bad. So learning how to move more into your logic mind has allowed me not to fall into my emotions. And it's taken a time and a practice it takes practice. It's like a muscle memory. Like, you have to remind yourself, this is not my circus. These are not my monkeys. This is not my problem. This is not my responsibility. And it can be really hard because society tries to tell you, you should feel bad for that person. You should take your time out for that person. And it's like, dude, I can barely handle my own shit right now. So like, unless it's more than just a smile while I'm walking by, I really don't have a lot to offer. And there's no guilt and shame in that. You got to understand, like, you've been doing the work, and I'll make excuses. Well, maybe they've experienced more than I have, but at the same time, they still have time like you have to grieve these things. They still have more resources. I found I wasn't able to be supported when I needed it, when I was trying to get through Ontario Works just on a temporary basis. And I've got people who are living off this stuff, so all they've got is time. And unfortunately, they're not using that time wisely. They're more numbing the pain than addressing the pain. And I'm not saying that's their fault either, but like, I've been in this position where I'm trying to raise 2 children. I've got all these people coming at me. I'm being targeted by couples who are miserable. I'm being targeted by men that don't like my boundaries. I'm being isolated, and I'm trying to keep my home from losing it. And I'm trying to pay my bills. I'm trying to work on my health. I'm trying to exercise. I'm trying to organize my home. I'm trying to get my garden up and running so I can grow food. Like, I'm doing all these things. And so while I may not have the same trauma as them, I still have trauma, and I still have challenge, and I'm still figuring my way through it. And so that's the problem I have sometimes, is like, it can be hard to say no to people where it feels bad, right? But if they can't even help themselves, I'm self-taught. I looked for when I came up against these challenges, I'm looking for answers. I'm looking, and it's all been like free. It's all through YouTube. It's all been trial and error. I've lost a lot of money through trying to heal myself and recover from the abuse and recognize it, and building boundaries and protecting myself. I've learned a lot. I've lost a lot. You know, where I have chunks of money, I could have gone back into the 9 to 5 and taken those chunks of money to fix up my house, to have my material world more pleasing. But to me, that wasn't going to help change my life. You know, I was tired of it. I was exhausted. And so the choices I made were hard, but I made them. And so like, it's really hard for me to make excuses for people when they're like, well, you have more than I do. Well, no, I'm making more of what I have, and I'm looking for opportunities, and they're, you know, like I said, I'm losing a lot of money in other areas, but I'm gaining my health, which means I'm going to be gaining my wealth later on. So like, some people are just not willing to invest in their health and in themselves, and they're more focused on material needs than they are like actually, how are you feeling? And so part of, I had to recognize where I was losing a lot of energy through my compassion for other people instead of focusing on myself, and giving myself the time to heal instead of giving, like falling back into that over giving pattern and falling back into that feeling bad for people. And I avoided partners because I would feel bad for them. While I found them physically attractive, I was like, this person's making me do all the emotional work, and they require me to put myself out there to be rejected, and they're not willing to meet me halfway. So I said no to partnering up with partners. And so like, I've been going alone. I've been choosing to be single because I'm not settling. And because I know when I settle for myself, that is going to cause a lot of anxiety. That's going to cause a lot more depression. And it's going to cause a lot more frustration because I'm going to be cleaning up someone else's mess, because I was able to recognize where I still had more work to do, and I was settling for people who have not done the work. And so learning where your emotions, where you lose a lot of energy, is also helpful, because like, when you learn to recognize your emotions and what they're trying to tell you in the situation, and you can slow your life down and you can move into the logic, that really helps you kind of guide yourself in the choices that you're making. So I learned when I'm settling, I pay attention to my emotions. And then I also recognize, like, is this a reason to really be emotional? Is this maybe I need to be more logical? Like, why am I upset about this situation that I've lost when this person was going to be a loss for me? I was going to take a hit. Yes, I have to continue on my own. And yes, I have to continue paying out of my pocket instead of getting support from outside. Yes, I have to do that. But at the same time, I'm learning and I'm growing and I'm developing myself to mature, to be able to take care of myself and not be codependent on other systems, other communities, other people. And while some people will say you're overly independent and that can be dangerous, I also am making room and space to, you know, connect with the right people in the right time. And by being more independent, it allows me to make those choices for myself and not rely on other people that actually are just toxic and looking to take from me. So when you learn all these things together, it helps you move away from the emotion that is too much, from receiving too little, and you learn how to get more for yourself, but for yourself, if that makes sense, you know? Because before, I would just fall into these patterns, and all it was me overgiving all the time. And so like, I was so far on the meter over here of like, just like people pleasing, fawning, overgiving, overthinking, overworking, overdoing, overwhelm, burnout. And so I had to bring myself all the way back over here. And so that was really hard because I'm so used to being over here. I was raised to be over here. I had to bring myself over here where it's like, I'm resting. I don't feel bad. I don't feel guilty. I don't feel like smiling today. I don't feel like creating content, even though I feel like what I have can be helpful for other people and I feel guilty about that. I had to hold to my line of self-care and self-love, which that was a muscle flex that I had not developed. So that was very uncomfortable to do that. And that's work. And so like, So why am I just going to go back to giving myself to people who aren't putting themselves in taking the risk, investing in themselves? Like, I've had to do this for myself, by myself. And so I don't want to go back to just giving to people who don't want to give back to me. I don't want to go back to those people that I feel bad for, because I feel like, you know what, they've been in very similar situations to me. Instead of looking at the difference of our trauma, I'm looking like, you have more, you've been given more, you're receiving more, and yet you're doing less with it. That's not something I want to feel bad for. I mean, it sucks that that's the choice they're making, but they're adults and they have the same access to information and intuition and knowledge and time to hermit and meditate to find those answers. And so I stopped feeling bad for people, even if they were in bad situations. And I could see, you're doing this because of this. I can see you're making those choices. I can see, like, you're drinking, you're numbing yourself, you're numbing your pain with alcohol. I can see you're avoiding with screens. I can see that you're hanging around, you know, like-minded people, and that's actually who you are. You know, I don't want to be around, I don't want to date a smoker. I don't smoke. I've made the decision. I was a smoker, I'm not anymore. Why would I go back to a smoker? That doesn't make sense. It's gross. It was gross when I was doing it. It's gonna be gross when you're doing it. You know, and I find when I was smoking, I was also walking on eggshells, and I associate people like that who, you know, don't feel safe in their space. And so I'm creating a safe space here. Why would I bring, they're unsafe too, because they don't know how to create a safe space as well, because they've stayed in the unsafe space. So it's like a feral animal. Once again, bringing that person into my safe home that I've created a peaceful place of, that would just undo everything. And while I can see, like, you're suffering, that's an inside job. I can't make you do anything. I can give information out and you can hear it and receive it, but it's the information that I give, I've actually had to put it into action to find out if it works or not. And that's taken a huge toll on me. I've had to, and so, like, when I'm offering one-on-one coaching sessions, and people may say $200 an hour, that's a lot of money. Well, it's a lot of money when I've taken the time to push past that line of self-care and self-love. Instead of going back into the burning building, I chose a path that was unknown to me, and where I didn't see that I was being supported. I didn't know how I was going to pay my bills. I didn't know where the money was coming, but I still chose me. A lot of people don't do that. And so, you know what, that's why I can no longer just dumb myself down and dim my light for people anymore, no matter what the situation, no matter what their intentions are. If I recognize toxic traits without the effort of change, then I can't go back there. And this is why I don't go back to past people or past partners, because they haven't done the work and they haven't felt the remorse. They may feel the regret of losing me, but they haven't experienced what they put me through to understand why I left. They just miss what I have to offer, what I was giving, what I was providing, what I was supplying. They miss the supply of me. They don't miss the actual value of me. You know, it's the work that I'm doing for them. You know, the fact that I'm not, you know, what they missed. See, they don't come back after you call them out. These narcissists don't come back when you call them out and say, you are doing this. They avoid you because you're holding them accountable. And now you're breaking the facade, how they see themselves and how other people are going to see themselves. So they want to squash that, right? And so being around these people, it's like being a feral animal, because it's like they just haven't grown. They're still in their delusion and denial. And like, you're going to have to arm wrestle and pull teeth with these individuals. That's exhausting too, right? So you're already trying to manage your emotions. And I had to learn to stop investing emotionally in people and look more to the logic as to why I was attracted to them. And that helped me become less emotionally attached, you know? And sometimes you just, in that process, you give yourself a permission to attach yourself. You know what? I understand. I'm daydreaming about this human that I don't even know. I understand I'm building up their personality. I understand I know nothing about them, and I'm placing all this stuff on them because that's what I need right now, because it's not what I'm receiving. And so like, those are things I would do in the minute, but I also understand, like, that is not, I don't expect that person to come back. Sometimes you need some sort of like, in the process of working through your emotions and elevating and getting more into logic and away from toxic, there's a number of bad habits and substances that I've had to rely on in order to get me to the next stage. So you just don't go 0 to 90 cold turkey. Like, some of these habits, like there's something you have to rely on until you can get yourself to that next stage. And that's just how I've done it. And so it's got me to a point where it's also made me realize where some of these practices that we have in the spiritual community or in this, in psychology and things like that, we rely on them, but they're still kind of like filler in the way that like, when I was so stressed, like when I get stressed out, it's because I'm not doing something that I need to be doing as well, right? So like if I don't have money, I'm stressed out. Well, why am I not going to get money? Because I don't know how to make money. Well, figure out how to make money. Well, easier said than done, right? And so like there's times where I feel stressed and people are like, well, go do yoga, go do this, go do, like, affirm. And while, don't get me wrong, some of that is helpful, but in certain moments, I need to go into that stress and that frustration and find out what am I missing? I'm missing something because I'm back here at the frustration and the stress, right? So I'm still missing something. So if you try to like smother your emotions with toxic positivity and affirmations that you don't believe, and with practices like yoga where you're trying to slow your breath down and slow life down and de-stress, if your life is full of stress, to me, trying to learn yoga is just going to stress me out even more personally. That's just how I am. I'm not saying yoga is useless. I'm just at this point, I don't want to do yoga. I want to get my money right, and so I've had to learn how to pick and choose things that help me in that moment, and realize when things are hurting me instead of helping me. And it's confusing because like some of the things, like I said, like when I went into freeze because I experienced sexual abuse and harassment at a workplace in Tillsonburg, there was I was frozen. I was on the couch for a month. I was required by EI to be job searching, and I finally had to tell them, like, I've been in depression this whole time. The only thing I can do is, like, I was trying to learn like Excel through the library because it's free, and then I was also job searching, but that they don't consider that active job searching. You have to be actively out on it and applying it, and so that was a challenge I had because I thought I was doing what I was capable of, and EI did not agree. Well, I don't, the process they went through was very gross. Dealing with the agent, I learned that I can't be putting things off and procrastinating, and I had to get real with how I was actually feeling. I am tired. I was tired. I was stressed out. There's something wrong here. This is not normal. When you try to normalize struggle and stress and stuff like that, that's going to keep your emotions bubbling up too, because you're ignoring the obvious. When you think you're going to hang out in a toxic environment and you're going to say affirmations and you're going to do yoga and you think you're going to be okay, I would argue that. When I tried to tolerate an abusive environment when I was working at Frunberg Knock and at Bully Bunches, those were the two environments where it was like, I'm sure my other environments were toxic as well. I convinced myself they weren't, right? Because I had, exercise and music when I worked at the post office. But the exercise was bordering on, like, that's extreme. Like, exercise is an hour or two a day, not 4 hours of walking, carrying heavy loads, right? So in these last two workplaces, I recognized that, like, I can't just keep tolerating this abusive behavior. And I thought that I could. And I recognized that I was too resilient and tolerant, and I was ignoring what my body was trying to tell me, and that I needed rest. And that's, so like that's another time, like I needed rest. And while I could look around at my house and it needed work, and my want was a house that is put together and refined and finished and the way I want it, I had to put that aside and focus on recovering my energy and my health, like my electrolytes, why I was so fatigued, why I was, I had to give myself time to purge and go through that experience I'd just been through. I have a process that I go through when I experience something like that. And so I had to give myself time to do that. which a lot of people did not like. When I was like in the social services and stuff, they're like, well, you got to get up and you got to get back you got to get back in there. And a lot of people are not happy when you choose rest over work. A lot of women are not happy when you choose rest over work, when they're choosing work. And so they don't want to support that, unfortunately, even though to me it says, well, like if you're doing something I don't know how to do, I'm going to watch how you do it and then I'm going to do it. But that's not what I was getting from these women. It was getting like targeting. I want to cut your support. I want to cut your financial support. I want to make sure your money is dwindling faster than you can rest. Like that's what I was receiving from individuals, and a lot of judgment and harshness. And so when I take the time to rest, that's something I took my money. It's all like the majority, when I say majority, like I got one, I think it's like one payment, maybe 2 payments of Ontario Works, and the EI I put into that. And if they're not going to do something about these workplaces, then that is something you take a stress leave. If the government doesn't want to recognize, because the labor board doesn't do anything about, I brought the labor board into Fruenberg Knock, and they just require like a small statement that's updated on a timely manner to state what they deem to be sexual harassment, and that they take it very seriously, but they do not. And so when that labor board agent went into Fruenberg Knock and didn't ask to review the recorded interviews to see if she was doing her job properly or if there's any bias, and didn't want to review my emails, like that, you should be getting compensation for that. And so like I wasn't able to take it to a lawyer at that time because I chose me over justice, because the justice that was happening wasn't just. Like when I talked to a lawyer, they're like, well, you might get $25,000 from this whole situation. I'm like, this situation felt like more than $25,000 worth of damage. So I had to make a choice to choose me and recover me and go without the justice and go without the validation from anybody else, because everybody in these workplaces, nobody contacted me, no one supported me, nobody asked how I was. I mean, in some of these places, especially Fruenberg, I wasn't talking to a lot of these people because I could see exactly who they were. And some of them I was like, wow, okay, that's the path you chose. And so yeah, you got to remember, like I did all this work. I put myself out there. I did all of this myself. And so it seems like for someone to expect me to go back and help other people while I'm still trying to recover myself and I've already done all that work, it just didn't seem right to me. It doesn't, like I said, like I put my content out there for people to watch, but like I've also learned to listen to when people aren't really listening. When you try to tell, when I started offering like, hey, like maybe you could try this, and oh, you're struggling from that, because it'd come up in conversation or something, and I would make I found it helpful when I do this. When people don't ask you about what you do and how you got there, they're either envious of you or they're not open to it, or both. So I stopped offering, because while I can see that this person is struggling, I can also see that they're not looking for answers. Because if you can see and recognize that someone is doing something that you're not capable of doing quite yet, you look and you ask, like, how do you do that? Like, I just don't see, that's being vulnerable. They don't want to be vulnerable. And it's not like I'm being intimidating. I'm always open and I love to help people. But at the same time, I also don't want to be set up to be a target in your group because you ask for help and you don't have my back when other people don't like that. You're trying to grow and I'm trying to help you. So that's how I describe like the benefit of like learning to regulate your emotions, because people will try to control your emotions, but it's also when you learn how to see what they're trying to tell you, you can make decisions. So you're creating less of those negative emotions and less of those highly excited emotions, because you got to come down from there too. I like to stay in the middle. I like to be content. I like to be neutral. When people ask me how I'm doing, I don't like to say, I'm great. I'm okay. I'm here, because it changes all the time. And that's just how I think I try to, especially during this transition right now, I'm just going through a lot. And I think I'm hanging in there pretty good because of the work I've done before this. It's allowed me to move to where I am now in this place mentally and emotionally. And there's definitely a benefit to investing in yourself to manage your emotions and where they're coming from, and recognize and purge and all of that stuff. It's definitely like to get that clarity. So the way I did this also was I removed myself from these environments. I removed myself from these people, and I hermited. And the only people I was talking to were my kids. And like if I needed to talk to, like even when I reached out to like I said, like social services and things, I was still getting a lot of attitude from people, a lot of like bias and unfair, like I think there's something about like the way I'm coming across is the way I can see them coming across. Like when I had a recent situation, I could hear the constable being one-sided, and the person I was with could also hear it, and they were like, that person is totally being biased. And I was like, how did you, like, you saw it too? And it's like, I thought it was just me. And they're like, no, it's me too. But they could see that I was getting like emotionally irritated, because I'm like, you're a constable. You're in a position of authority, and the fact that you lack this much discernment and you have this much judgment, and it's staggering. That's the scary part. But I can't let that make me afraid. And like the next time I have an issue, like I still called the police about my neighbor the next time I had an issue. I'm not going to let that deter me, because before, that's what they want. That's what they want. Remember these emotional storms, you're meant to calm them so they can't control you. But it's because also the people that are causing these emotional storms want control of you, because they don't have control of themselves, but they also don't want you to, like, when you gain control, you gain stability. And when you gain stability, you gain clarity. And when you get there, like, you're going to get prosperity, right? Because health and wealth are, in my opinion, attached to discipline and consistency, and knowing what direction is working for you and which one is not. So like I used to do oracle cards quite often, but I think it's more important for me to focus on how I did my trial and error, how physically I got here, because I didn't rely on the cards a lot. A lot of the cards were just confirmation, and it was helping me to give advice to those people. So like I was using it as a storyboard, right? But I also use it as a confirmation when I'm like, okay, what is going on here really? Because sometimes I get stuck. And it's interesting because a lot of tarot readers don't rely on their own readings, but I actually started seeing that the readers were telling their own energy in the readings. And so that's when I started saying, like, I don't want this to be true when I try to read from my cards. I don't want this to be my current situation, because it feels like I've done so much more work than I've actually had. But the reality is, this is true. And so when I started accepting my reality, then it allows you to see things clearer, and it makes you more resilient towards failure. Because when I started looking at failure, I started recognizing some of the failure was like I just kept doing the same things like thinking I was doing it differently, but I was just convincing myself it was different, but it was actually the same, and I just had settled. And so yeah, when I started recognizing I could start pulling my cards for myself, I'm like, oh, okay, this is my energy. So now it makes it a little bit more difficult when I pull cards, because I'm like, it does feel very vulnerable when I'm putting myself out there. And it's not the case every time. But sometimes it can be very like, wow, this is like a glass, and I feel like people can, like, the veil is thin. And I want that for people. It just was challenging because I felt like there were certain people from my past that were following me on my page, and I didn't want to give it to them. I didn't feel like they deserved it. But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? The chances of them making use of this information is very rare. And if they decide to do the work, I would love that. It doesn't mean we're going to reconnect, but that's what all I wanted in the end, was for these people to learn the lessons. Because it's not just to stop hurting me, it's to stop hurting themselves. Like, they don't understand, these people that are creating these emotional storms, they're hurting inside. And while they will recognize that, they don't think they have to take accountability, because they've been abused. And so they don't think they have to be accountable for their actions onto other people. They're like, well, I've been abused, so it makes sense that I'm emotionally volatile. No, it does not. No, you are the abuser at this point. If you're emotionally unhinged, that is abusive behavior for whoever you throw that hurricane onto. That's your business, your responsibility. And so when I started learning that, and when I was like aware that I was being so responsible of myself, and I'm the one who's got to clear up my karma, it made me realize that I don't have to do other people's work, and it's not my job. And especially, I'm not going to force myself onto people who are not ready for the answer. And I'm no longer, that is not my responsibility to like sit here almost like, you know how like when a toddler starts walking, you're like waiting to catch them, because like you can see, I've been on this path before, I can see what this looks like, and so you're just kind of like holding your breath and like waiting. And so like those are people that are not safe for me to be around. If I have to hold my breath waiting for that shoe to fall, that's you know, the people I'm around now, like I understand, like we all make mistakes, but then we also apologize and do different, and we acknowledge I made a mistake. You know, you know, if there is an outburst, because this is life and life can be challenging. Don't get me wrong, like, so it's not that there's not going to be an outburst. It's like, is there an accountability for that outburst? Is there acknowledged, like, wow, I definitely shouldn't have unloaded that on you. I shouldn't have talked to you like that. I shouldn't have said that to you. You are not that person. This is me. This is my issue. I was frustrated with the truth that you were saying. That's what I didn't like. I was uncomfortable in that situation. And so I don't even want an apology when people are like that. I just want an acknowledgement, like that's, you're aware of your behavior. Because if you're not aware of your behavior, then you're in denial, and those people are dangerous. Being in denial is dangerous. And they're highly addictive, like in substances and things that create avoidance and numbing out, so they don't have to take accountability for their actions. So when I learned all this stuff, it helped me to move away from emotionally volatile people, not only to not get caught up in that tornado with them. It's still a work in progress for me, but it is helpful to, like, I go through a process. I'll make a video about that later. I got to get my dogs out and walk, and it's beautiful out, and I got to make some food. So hopefully this is helpful in understanding why it's important to learn how to manage your emotions and recognize them, and what they're trying to tell you, but also how other people are trying to manipulate you through your emotions when you're unhinged yourself. I'm trying to work better at formatting my videos because of my trauma. I do feel like I've experienced, the amount of trauma I've experienced has affected my brain at times, where I lose words and I lose my spot easily, and there are times where I forget the meaning of certain words. I'm like, is that what that means? I also think that's tied into like doubting myself, or I think I know something but I don't. But I do feel like during my especially the last few years, I've experienced a lot of challenging times and trauma, and so it's definitely plays with my mind at times, and it makes it hard to put my material together and organize it and keep it focused on one area. So it's something I'm aware of and I'm trying to work through, and your patience and support would be lovely. I think I made a video but previously, and I was supposed to cut something out as an emotional moment. I can't seem to find it right now, so that may be in there as well, because I'm not great at editing, and I sometimes forget that it needs to be edited. But this is me, this is how I am, and I'm getting better every day. So with practice, I think this is going to get better, and the further I get away from these human hurricanes and learning how to support myself better and be better, I definitely think this is going to improve. So let me know if you experience any of that. If you notice your memory from experiencing these individuals. Do you notice things about your memory? Do you notice things about, I know my eye vision is definitely different. I'm working on getting my muscles and my body back in that regard, because I felt like when I was couch bound for so long, I lost a lot of my muscles and stuff like that. So I'm slowly building, and I think that's also where a lot of the emotion comes up too. It's like thinking that things are gonna happen faster than they actually do, and that can be the frustrating part, because you feel like there's a lot of feels happening in the process when you're trying to rebuild yourself. So account for that too. And remember, when you expand your energy like that, when you get overly excited and overly low, there's a time you're gonna have to rest. I would also check your electrolytes. I would add more electrolytes at the time, because if you're crying a lot, if you're stressed, these are all things that deplete electrolytes. You could be eating food that is diuretic, like dairy, sugar, caffeine, to try to keep up. I remove caffeine from my life, because whenever I have caffeine, it feels like I'm trying to do too much, and that's where I've been trained to feel like I am not enough and I have to do too much. And so caffeine is no longer on my list of substances, because I realize it's very easy for me to overdo it when I have caffeine in my system. So hopefully that helps. I will see you in the next one. Be sure to like and subscribe, support. There are ways to donate if you want to support my cause and trying to create more content. If you do find this helpful for you and others, there's a way to do that, and I would appreciate anything that you can send my way, whether it be a like, a comment, you know, a share with someone who you think would benefit from this content. And like I said, there are ways to financially donate if that's something you're comfortable with and feel like you are in a position to do. So I will see you in the next one, and take care.